The Red Sox lose last night to Toronto, and therefore your Boston Red Sox are eliminated from playoff contention for the third year in a row. And for the fifth time in the last 6 years, they will not be playing postseason baseball. That, my friends, is what we call not good enough. You can't be the Boston Red Sox in 2024 and be missing the playoffs 3 years in a row. This is not, the early 60s. You just can't be pulling that crap. In fact, this could be the worst stretch that you could say since the early 90s, the Sons of Butch's era under Butch Hobson. In fact, 3 straight missed postseasons is tied for the longest drought in that respect since the early 90s. Since you got to go back to 94 to have more than 3 straight seasons that they missed the playoffs. Like, we're talking about the model of consistency in a lot of ways. They didn't win World Series for a lot of that stretch, but really from the 67 Impossible Dream Team on, they were not a losing ball club. Like, my dad has been watching the Red Sox since 1966, and we've seen he's seen only like one more last place Red Sox team than I have. Think about that. I was born in 1997. This is a bad stretch, a straight up bad stretch. And it looked like they were making strides, and that's not the case. The Sox were 10 games over 500 at the All-Star break. 10 games over. And they collapse in the second half again. They are 87 and 116 in the second half over the last 3 years. Let me repeat that. In the second half of baseball seasons in the last 3 years, your Boston Red Sox are 87 and 116. Awful, terrible, putrid, whatever you want to say to describe it. That's a .429 winning percentage in the second halves of seasons. When the money is on the table, they take their ball and go home. Those numbers from Tom Caron at Nesson, by the way. And in the second half, look no further than the bullpen that you were shoring up at the trade deadline by bringing in Garcia and Sims. They were 13 for 31 in save opportunities in the second half. 13 of 31. You were 10 games up at the All-Star break, and you pissed away 18 right off the bat because you can't figure out a bullpen. Do not have a major league bullpen. That's so embarrassing. Like, how does this franchise not look itself in the mirror and say that's embarrassing? They don't, because this ownership group says, well, we're sustainable. We didn't pay the luxury tax. That's such horseshit, man. You look at the other teams in the pay grade of the Red Sox. I'm talking the Yankees, the Dodgers, the Mets. They're not looking at themselves in the mirror saying we're sustainable. The Mets are 17 games over 500, and they're pissed at where they are. They should be better. And here are the Red Sox, trying to get to a 500 record, barely avoiding the third straight year of 78 and 84. And they're patting themselves on the back because they're sustainable and they've got a young core. Bullshit, man. I know the farm system was terrible 3-4 years ago. I know that. Now these guys are ready to make the major leagues. But we're not talking about just trading prospects here and keeping them off limits for a couple years. We're talking about a team with one of the highest payrolls in baseball, a team that has no excuse not to spend money in free agency, except for the grand old fact that they don't fucking want to. And that shit has to end now. It has to. Craig Breslow went on EEI this morning and saying, we've got to get better. We've got to do, we got to find a right-handed bat. We got to get some balance in this lineup. You got to splash some cash. You're in a great situation where you are almost having an influx of young guys. You probably have one too many young infielders. That's why Tristan Casas will be on the trade block this winter. And that can open some things up for you in terms of young pitching. But there are 2 top-of-the-line Cy Young Award winners out there in free agency, right around 30, 31 years old, which is something that you used to not touch. But now you see the teams that are going on to win World Series, and they are touching 30, 31-year-old starting pitchers in free agency. It's not the taboo thing anymore. You've got to put that to bed when you can't make the postseason. So the rumor was, Tristan Casas for one of those young pitchers in Seattle. Sure, I love it. I like Casas as a player. He just had a 3-homer day the other day, but he's almost expendable here. And when you are a franchise that has not been able to develop any kind of starting pitching in your farm system for at least 15 and really going on 20 years now, and you've got an influx of young infielders ready to play in the major leagues, you can't be too picky. These are the only ways you can get young pitching is through the trade market. You can't develop them, and they don't go to market. The other two guys I'm looking at, Blake Snell and Corbin Burns. Everyone's going to be looking at those guys. Corbin's 30. Blake Snell's 31. They've both won a Cy Young in the last 3 years. There's no excuse for the Red Sox not to make a serious push for one of these two guys. And to be quite honest with you, at this point, there's no excuse for them not to sign one of these two guys. And I like Snell's numbers a little bit better. I think Corbin Burns is the best pitcher in the AL East with Baltimore. But the numbers that I look at have been going down the last few seasons. While he's still been super effective, the FIP has gone up. The homers per 9 has gone up, which I never like pitching at Fenway. The strikeouts to walk has gone down. So there's a lot to be concerned about there. Not that he won't be an elite pitcher, but you look at everything: innings, strikeouts, ERA plus, FIP, WHIP. They're all going in the wrong direction, and he's north of 30. It's going to be 30 when you sign him. Still an elite pitcher, though. I'm not too dismayed by the Red Sox signing him to a 5-year deal. It might bite you in the last 2 years, but he should still be an elite, top-of-the-line pitcher. The other one's Blake Snell, who has won a Cy Young now in both leagues and can get pretty anemic in the years in between. But my God, the numbers, man. The numbers going in the right direction. Strikeouts per 9 going up the last 3 years. Hits per 9 going down. Led the league in that category last year, by the way, when he won the Cy Young. WHIP going down. FIP going down. ERA plus going in the right direction. Well, it wasn't as good this year as it was last year, but overall going up. Strikeouts per 9 going in the right direction. Walks going down. Blake Snell is still a guy who is at the top of his game at 31 years old. He's had a weird last couple of seasons where he's looked like an absolute bum in some of those years with San Diego, and he'll look like a bum for half the season, and the other half he'll look like a Cy Young Award winner. So yeah, you got to have some balance in this lineup. I think they make a serious push at Alex Bregman, and Dever starts DHing for you, but it's going to take more than a right-handed bat, because I think you've got some good pieces in the rotation, but you don't have enough. And that is what kind of faltered towards the end of the season. Tanner Houck hit his career high in innings like right after the All-Star break. Cutter Crawford, he's never thrown that much in his life. Brian Bayo, disappointment this year. Disappointment. But you add some insurance of someone like a Corbin Burns or a Blake Snell, a bona fide stud at the top of your rotation, that takes a load off everybody. And it seems like a weird baseball cliche, but it seems to work in every example you look at of playoff teams over the last few years. When the rotation is better, it's much easier to work out your bullpen. Much easier. And guys find defined roles. They find the pitch selection that they need to use. And all of a sudden, your Jag guys in the bullpen are just that much better. And all of a sudden, you got a good bullpen. But 13 for 31 on save opportunities is atrocious. Just horrifically bad. This was a team that was feeling real good about itself in June and July. They had closed the gap on the Yankees big time. They had a great month of June where they were one of the best teams in baseball. The Yankees were one of the worst teams in baseball in June. Going into the All-Star break, plenty of momentum. Going into the trade deadline was still momentum, but knowing you needed to work out the bullpen pieces, all of those pieces failed. Sims, Garcia, Jansen for some depth on the bench, all of them failed. So it's not a great season for Craig Breslow, year one. I still believe he is a baseball guy who played, almost 15 years in the league. I know not all Boston sports commentators believe that, but This has to change now. And it's such a simple thing in free agency if the Red Sox can just nut up and say, you know what? We don't love the luxury tax, but you know what we don't like more? Missing the fucking playoffs. Because that is becoming an annual tradition. In fact, I don't want to say they were lucky, but it was a fluke thing that they were within 2 wins of the World Series in 2021. It didn't feel like a fluke at the time, but when you miss the playoffs the next 3 years, that's a fluke. Guys had some career years. You got the last ounce of good baseball out of a couple of guys, and you had a real chance to make it to the World Series. You were an underdog. You probably shouldn't have beaten Tampa, but you did. You beat the Yankees in a one-game playoff at home. You almost didn't make the postseason altogether. And you have not made any moves since then to make your team better. You have only made your team worse. Eovaldi walks, wins a World Series. Schwarber walks, leads the league in homers. He's probably going to win a World Series this year. They have no one to blame but themselves. They have taken a pussy approach to free agency, and they are now reaping the rewards of that. And what I'm fascinated by is that Alex Cora has signed this extension because he was playing with it during the season of, if they're not going to commit to bringing some better players on this team, I'm not doing this shit anymore. And he signs an extension right around the All-Star break when things are going well for the Red Sox, and now he's locked in. I heard Coley Mick say this for Section 10, and I wholeheartedly agree with him in that there has to be some sort of agreement, or else there wouldn't be any reason for Cora to extend himself midseason, of some sort of agreement of, we're going to spend some money. We're going to bring in some guys this year. I don't know if it's going to be Juan Soto, but they'll absolutely be in that sweepstakes. And it wouldn't help their lineup balance in terms of a right-handed hitter, but he is one of the best hitters in baseball. But they need to go out and get some guys. And for the first time in a couple of years, you're far enough away from the luxury tax that I don't want to be hearing that bullshit anymore. And you have some trade chips. You have some great prospects, one or two of them who are going to be on the roster next year. Roman Anthony might make this team out of camp. Marcelo Meyer, you will see on this team next year, maybe before roster expansion. There's no excuse to not go out and get some of these guys and make your team better. Jordan Montgomery wanted to play here. And maybe Scott Boras did fuck it up because Montgomery fired him after signing with Arizona. But that was a guy who was a top of the line pitcher who just won the World Series, who wanted to play here, and you couldn't get it done. I'm running out of patience. And so are these fans, man. Go see Fenway Park. They're running out of patience here. And so is the manager, and so are the players.
We are Rogue Media Sports.